I can do better. So I have a confession to make. And I've been thinking a lot about this. Been thinking about this the last 2 years, basically. And I can do better. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that, and I'm going to adjust my camera because I think it's a little wonky. I don't know if I made any difference there. Let me see. Okay. What I mean by that, no, I'm not happy with that. Give me a second. I'm going to adjust this. I'm not even going to restart. I'm just going to adjust it. There you go. I know, is that my OCD kicking in? Okay. Here's what I'm not happy about. Here's where I can do better. I was listening to a podcast with Ray Dalio and Lex Friedman. Two people that I respect and admire for various reasons and for different reasons as well. And what I got from this podcast, I was really blown away with how Ray Dalio was so objectively speaking to historically how we've evolved as a humanity, particularly in our socioeconomic and geopolitical models of execution. And he was just so objective in this is how it is for, say, communism or socialism. This is how it is for a free market capitalistic society. Here are the pros, here are the cons, right? And he started speaking about industries as well and war and how global politics influences economies and so forth. And he spoke to the current pandemic and various other things that are happening in our world today. And I thought to myself, wow, this man is so educated and so wise and very successful. He's super uber wealthy. And he's humble. There was a humility to his speaking, and he had poise and he had composure and he had compassion, and he wasn't hypercritical and he wasn't defensive and he wasn't capitalism is the best and here's why. He didn't put his stake in the ground in that way, and he wasn't being like Switzerland and sitting on the fence per se. Like he was owning what he favors, but he was also providing evidence and clarity for some other systems and how, based on certain values, they can be really effective. And what it got me thinking is about me and how I'm allowing my unresolved wounds and resolved wounds and my fears and my traumas to come through and impact not only the way I communicate, but the way I express ideas. An example of that is what is happening in Australia now, geopolitically, economically, medically as well, right? And how I've been somewhat outspoken, not really outspoken, but I have had massive, and one of the reasons why I haven't been as outspoken about it is because I haven't wanted to inject my charge. I've had massive charge, anger and frustration and rage and despondency and anger, hatred, right? Like because I'm interpreting the actions of the Australian government as intrusive and autocratic and oppressive. And they may, to some extent, depending on where you sit on the fence, depending on what vantage point you take, they may be autocratic, they may be oppressive, but I've been expressing that with more than just passion. I've been expressing that with charge, emotional charge. And that emotional charge has come from unresolved places within myself. It's really pushed my button of freedom. So, and I want to explain this to you because, and I want to give you the details and make the connections, because this is how we generally operate. When we haven't resolved childhood trauma and pain and suffering and wounds of low self-worth or being exposed to volatile environments or forming ideas and ideals about the world, about ourselves, about how we give and receive love, they unconsciously play out in our lives and they dictate how we behave. And that, for the last couple of years, has been happening here on and off in cycles for me, right? And I'd get into these arguments with friends who are living in Australia, and I'd be saying, can't you see that you live in a dictatorship? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, I'd be attacking them, and they're in it, and they're saying, well, maybe this is what needs to happen, and it's a good thing. And I'm like, what do you mean it's a good thing? Your freedom's being taken away from you. And I'm just not listening to them because I'm so triggered, and I can do better. And this video is about taking ownership of that. And it's not like I'm all right, self-righteous now, and I'm sitting on this pedestal above everyone else, and look at me, I'm all humble now. Definitely not, because I'm still upset and angry. But let me tell you something, this podcast has really opened up my heart and opened up my eyes, obviously ready to hear it. And it's diffused me a great deal. And so let me talk about this freedom button. So I'm looking at what's happening in Australia. I'm living in the US. And I'm thinking, wow, like the Australian government is moving towards this scale. Like if we have a spectrum of socioeconomic geopolitical models, right? And say, just to say, socialism, communism is somewhat on this end, right? I'm seeing Australia slide towards that. And I'm not one that has ever actually said communism or socialism is bad, right? However, what I'm seeing is this forcefulness and autocracy, or expressions of autocracy and oppression that I'm seeing. This is what I'm witnessing and interpreting in Australia, and it's pushing my buttons of, I crave freedom. I have a fear of not having freedom. And that fear came from watching my parents in their dynamic, hearing my mum and having enmeshment with my mother, emotional parentification enmeshment, where I became her unconscious surrogate partner. But hearing her say, if I wasn't married, I'd be free. If I wasn't married, I would be able to fulfill my dreams and do this and do that. And if it wasn't for you children, I wouldn't be here. And all these things, my parents had a very turbulent, unhealthy, toxic relationship. And over the years, I interpreted that as freedom being paramount to being human, to being sovereign, to having autonomy. And so that became a hierarchy of my own internal values, freedom. And so when I see freedom being taken or being or oppression being forced on people, it really triggers me. It really activates and charges me. Even in our relationship, if Christine is trying to tell me to do something or she's making suggestions, I see it as an encroachment on my freedom. Now, over the years, I'd be really negative about that. I'd be super intense about it. I'd be unconscious and aggressive about it. Now, not so much, but I see myself like, growing up too young, being a parent to my family. I had my freedoms taken from me. And what I'm doing is I'm projecting what I'm seeing, which is tidbits of information through mainstream media and social media and anecdotal information that my friends are saying or telling me and sharing with me, and people that I know that are sharing with me. And I'm interpreting that as their freedom is being taken away. And because I also have a pain point around not being able to for so long not being able to see my family. I have a baby on the way. It's too risky to go to Australia because the rules and the laws just keep changing. Well, I don't know if they're even legal laws or formal laws, and that's another conversation. But the parameters for entering and exiting the country, even though I'm a citizen, keep changing. And that's putting more pressure on me, or rather I'm interpreting that as more pressure. I want to take radical responsibility here. This is what part of this video is about. And I feel really lost and despondent. And that's another pattern of mine. I was so victimized as a child. I felt so helpless and hopeless, and I felt so weak and passive as a child that as a teenager and as an adult, I was forceful and I was oppressive. I was angry. I still can get really angry, but I was the one being hyper defensive and attacking and making sure that I've got my whatever I need and whatever I want, and I would force that at any cost because it was taken from me so much. My autonomy, my sovereignty, my childhood was taken from me. Right? That was my perception. That was my interpretation. I felt very alone. So when I see all of this unpacking itself, I get beyond just passion. I get triggered. And one of the realizations I had when I was listening to that podcast was that I have intelligent ideas, and they can carry value, and they can carry weight, and they can help people, including myself, see the world from different vantage points. But because I'm so triggered and so charged, I'm really only showing one perspective, which is limited, and I'm limiting myself, and I'm just stuck in this whirlpool of unregulated emotions, which is stirring up old trauma that's, I don't want to say unresolved, but just activated, because I've resolved so much of it. Again, not perfect, lots of trauma to work through still. But there's stuff there, and I wanted to take ownership of that, where I can be more objective, I can be more matter of fact. I'm fairly well researched. I mean, I can definitely research a lot more, can take responsibility for that. But if I just simply express without the emotional charge, I think I can have a greater impact on at least not changing anyone's mind, but just presenting a worldview that may be interesting and may pique curiosity, right? And the more I can have my curiosity piqued, and lockdowns are an example. Like I'm listening to a podcast at the moment that is the case for against lockdowns, and so interesting points. I'm going to listen to the case for lockdowns, right? Or what are the benefits of that, and do they exist, and make more well-informed decisions. Not that I don't listen to opposing views, I absolutely do, and I have for a very long time. Opposing views of what I believe in or what I think is accurate or right or healthy to run an organization, company, family, whatever, right? Whatever the topic is. But I just know I can do better. And I know that I've been coming from a lot of wounding, and it's affected the way I react. And I have been reactive, and I've been dismissive, and I've been just really fucking angry and sad. And I've allowed myself to grieve because I know how important grief is for men, for women, for all of us, for humanity, for any living organism. Right? I know how important grief is. Maybe not any and every living organism, but most. And I've allowed myself to grieve, but there's more there. There's more there, and I can do better. And so this is an invitation to all of us to just ask the question, can we do better? Can I do better? Just because I can do better doesn't mean you can. Maybe you're doing your best. I don't know. Maybe you don't need to do better. But for me, I can do better. And that podcast was really pivotal as something that's happening in the world now that I am deeply passionate about and I do care for and I do believe. And my mother at the moment is really sick with this thing called the vid. And she's in hospital and she has pneumonia and she has no filtration and she's hurting and she's suffering and she's going to be better and she's already on the upward mend, right? And the interesting thing is, with all of that, and I've had it as well, and it was so intense, with all of that, my position on how global government has responded to this as a whole, as a collective, which has been massively disconnected, hasn't changed. My views actually haven't changed. Sincerely, I can say that. They have not changed. However, my delivery and what's underneath some of the charge, that needs to move. It has moved. I believe it has. It's moving, I should say, and there's more there. Yeah, but this was just really important, really on my heart. And we're not going to change if we don't change. And if we don't take ownership and responsibility of our stuff, of our shit, we just won't budge. We won't move. And so I want to budge and I want to move because that feels in alignment for me. And I want momentum in that direction. And so I asked the question, what can I do better? And I can do better. Hopefully I've unpacked some of that with some clarity for you today, that you can also look at some of your childhood experiences, your developmental experiences, and observe how they unconsciously are still impacting you today. And being in support, whether it's seeking counsel or working with a psychologist or a coach or a shaman or a group. If you're a man, join our men's group, mpb.movement on Instagram, empoweredbrotherhood.com. If you're seeking coaching, contact me, coachwithsteph.com. Take any of our courses with Christine and I, our inner child course, our relationship course. Do your work, do your inner work. I am a perpetual student of inner work, of self-discovery, of exploration of the internal self, of consciousness, of the cosmos. That's my encouragement. Anyway, I'm out. Peace out. Peace in. Pound blessings to you. Thank you for listening.